The way that we use messaging to solve some of the problems that exist within the space are, number one, most of the time when you are trying to leave your feedback for a restaurant, they make it incredibly difficult. So they're either going to have this long, hairy URL that you have to go to that's hidden at the bottom of a receipt with a 23-digit code you have to input manually. And then they end up just saying, forget it, that's way too difficult.
Hey everyone, this is the State of Business Texting podcast, where we talk about all things messaging. I am your host, Zach Kunkel, Director of Solution Marketing and Go-to-Market Strategy at Bandwidth. And I'm here with Caitlin Long.
Hey y'all.
Caitlin is our Senior Director of Product Management for Messaging.
Thanks, Zach. So we live and breathe business texting every day. I especially do. But we know a lot of product owners don't have access to that same level of insider know-how. So on this podcast that Zach and I co-host, we're opening the door and having candid conversations with platform leaders and industry experts so that you can hear about the latest developments in messaging, as well as the daily wins and lessons that come with business texting.
That's right. And today we are joined by one of those insiders, Mr. Derek Morgan, president and co-founder of Ovation. What's up, Derek?
Hey, so glad to be here with you guys.
Yes. Thanks so much for joining us. And Derek, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background and your work at Ovation. The little that I know, it's such a cool story. So would love for our listeners to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just a little bit about me. Love entrepreneurship. That's kind of what I wanted to get into forever. And so that's what I studied. I studied entrepreneurial management. That's what my degree is in. And when I was a junior still, just transitioning into becoming a senior in college, I was presented with the opportunity to join on with an individual, my co-founder now and partner, Zach Oates, to build something really cool in the industry. And so fast forward, 7-8 years, and we've grown our business quite a bit. We've got a big team here internationally or here domestically, and then we've got some team members internationally, and we're servicing a ton of different people. So that's kind of a little bit about me. I mean, personally, got a great family behind me that supports me. 3 young kiddos with one on the way who's going to be here any day.
Oh man, congrats.
Yeah, thank you. Counting down the days on that one. Our little daughter was sad that it's going to be yet another boy. So 3 boys
fair.
and 1 girl. But she's the princess. She'll get all of the attention. So living in the beautiful state of Utah and just having a good time with life.
That's awesome. And I love that y'all are in Utah as well, sort of the Silicon Slopes area. That sort of the new and upcoming tech hub. And within that area, I'm assuming that's where is Ovation based there. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit more about what Ovation does and sort of where it sits in the ecosystem and what your mission is specifically from that perspective.
Yeah. So we are, we consider ourselves to be part of Silicon Slopes here. There's a booming entrepreneurship and tech scene here within Utah. So pleased to be around fellow entrepreneurs who are doing really cool things. And really, Ovation started because there was this need for local businesses, and we work primarily with restaurants, to connect on a deeper level with their guests. When you are going to a restaurant, you're putting a lot of trust in that individual or in that restaurant, right? You're trusting that they're going to give you good service, that they're going to provide food for you that's going to be safe, obviously, as a bare minimum, but also enjoyable, and that there's going to be this experience. It's much more important than maybe if I go get my oil changed, right? I'm kind of just wanting a transaction if I'm getting my oil changed. But if I'm going to a restaurant, I want an experience. And so what we found was that there were not a lot of great tools that focused in on the guest experience to be able to then measure that experience take action on that experience when it's not so great, allow them to see the restaurant, to see where they're doing well. So that's kind of the space that we live in, is within this restaurant technology space. We're really helping them to collect and measure feedback around the guest experience in a way that is beneficial both to the guest and to the business. Where traditionally it's been a me type deal for the restaurant where they're getting a lot of good data, but what do I get as the guest in return? With using
Yeah.
Ovation, a lot of it's about dialogue and communication, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about today.
No, we will. We are on the State of Messaging podcast. It's almost like we planned that transition, which we didn't. But I'm actually curious. As a frequent restaurant goer myself, I do appreciate sort of the continuous communication loop that you're really sort of helping to facilitate here. How do you use messaging to leverage that?
There's a very famous restaurateur. His name is Danny Meyer. He literally wrote the book on hospitality and how to provide incredible restaurant experiences. And one of the things that he says in his book is hospitality is a dialogue. That's what he says. And I picked up on that and I thought, that is amazing. And it really is, right? It's an experience between two individuals, between people, right? And that's what a restaurant experience should be. When you go, you're interacting with a server, you might be interacting with a manager, you're interacting with people there, and you're having sort of this dialogue, this communication. So the way that we use messaging to solve some of the problems that exist within the space are, number one, most of the time when you are trying to leave your feedback for a restaurant, they make it incredibly difficult. So they're either going to have this long, hairy URL that you have to go to that's hidden at the bottom of a receipt with a 23-digit code you have to input manually. And then they end up just saying, forget it, that's way too difficult. Or you're presented with a not very great option, which is you can leave an online review and complain, and then everybody can see it.
Right.
There's
And you got to
not a
create a
great-
profile for that. There's probably your face maybe
Absolutely.
attached to it. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's harm done to the restaurant. Their reputation has now been hurt forever because your review is there. Even if the restaurant is able to take care of it and resolve the concern, it's still there to live on. So where we use messaging is we're actually messaging guests shortly after their experience to ask them, how was everything? And to make it very simple, provide them with a link where they can answer only 2 questions about their experience and in near real time, be connected back to the restaurant in the case that they did have an issue, so that that manager at that very location can respond back and resolve the concern, even sending off an offer, doing, an apology at the very least. So we're opening up that dialogue between restaurant and guest, even in a format that's not traditionally that way. When I go to Chipotle, right, I'm not always having a long conversation with a server, right? I'm just asking what I want, and then I'm
Yeah.
preferably not, right? It's a little
Yeah.
more transactional. And yet, when I want to communicate to them because something went wrong or because I want to give them kudos, I want to be able to open up that dialogue easily. And so that's what we're helping to do.
So Derek, I love first off, storyteller you are. Why did I just talk like Yoda? I'm not sure, but
Go with it, Zach.
I can tell that you're clearly passionate and you understand your customer. How does a customer of one of your customers, and someone who's eating at the restaurant, how does that conversation actually start?
Yeah, great question. Well, a lot of the times we're proactively asking the guest, right? So a lot of times they've ordered online, and so they've given their opt-in to be messaged by the restaurant, and then the restaurant, we're triggering through our technology, triggering a message to say, hey, would you mind just answering 2 questions about your experience today? It would really help us out. So there's this altruism of the guest saying, you know what, I do like this place, and today things weren't quite what I was hoping. And that happened to me just this last week, where I went to, actually, funny enough, one of our customers who's close by has several locations across several states, but I went to my local restaurant, and I normally have a phenomenal experience here. And this time it was not the case. Everything went wrong. And I felt like I wanted to make them aware of that because there were probably things they could do to change. And so sure enough, I got my text message after I placed my online order and I went and picked it up. I had my food, got my text right as I was finishing. And I thought, great, this is an opportunity. And so then we just simply will ask them, how was the experience? Rate it, open up some feedback, and that'll get sent to the management. And from there, the dialogue continues. Managers can respond, resolve concerns, do whatever they need to in order to make the guest feel heard, because that's 99% of it. When you ask people, was your problem resolved? Most of the time, what's affecting whether they consider it to be resolved or not was whether they were acknowledged. Because most of the time, it's never acknowledged. They answer that 50 question survey, and it just goes into a black hole of nothingness that they never hear from the restaurant ever again.
Yeah. I've been on that side of the feedback and can very much agree and empathize with that experience. I love the idea too of just 2 questions, like how much more approachable and finishable is that survey, and then actually actionable from the restaurant. So I love that idea. So that's a little bit about the customer's customer from Ovation's point of view. Would love to talk about how your platform, how do you guys onboard customers in the sense of, I know we were talking offline a little bit about using automation to get numbers and quickly get customers to time to value. Because I'm sure as you are selling to these restaurants, it's a great idea, but how quickly am I going to get that feedback? And it sounds like it's pretty much up to the restaurant. How quickly do you guys want to go? And we can go.
Exactly.
So talk to us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah. So for us, what's really important is the ability to automate a lot of these things, right? Automate the onboarding. For us, we work within a space where one particular restaurant brand might have 500, 1,000 different stores all across the country, even all across the world. And so what we do is, in order to facilitate that direct communication with your local restaurant, where you're talking to the manager who was managing where you had the experience, every single restaurant, store, or unit that we have needs to have its own phone number, which means that we are provisioning thousands and thousands of phone numbers to support all of our restaurant customers. And so that can't be done. I suppose it could be, but it's so much easier to do that in an automated way where we can automatically get those phone numbers. We can get them verified. We can do everything programmatically and through automation so that our onboarding team isn't being slammed with just filling in forms and submitting order requests if they've got a 500 restaurant customer who needs to go live in 5 days. And so we use a lot of automation there. We'll make use of, obviously, APIs under the hood, where we've built our own internal portals that as soon as these customers get created, we're able to see all of their stores. We're able to provision a phone number for all of their stores. We're able to collect all the information we need to make sure that it gets submitted for verification. Like, all of that is done behind the scenes so that our onboarding team can be super efficient and our customers aren't having to wait weeks and weeks for setup. That's one of the key advantages to us over competition, is that some competitors of ours, their onboarding times are months long. They're working with you for months. We're working with you for weeks. And in some cases, to your point, Zach, days. If you want to go live and you're ready to go, we can support that.
Are you helping the customers determine the best messaging path? I'm not sure if you're offering toll-free and local sort of options. If it's a local chain, I would imagine that maybe that would be more preferable. But I'm curious, how do you kind of guide customers towards the appropriate messaging path? And do you necessarily see any kind of differences in the two based on the actual customer friendly side of it?
Yeah. So one aspect of our business that we've yet to touch on is aside from this more intimate one-to-one communication that's happening between guest and the restaurant, manager, we're also collecting additional opt-in and maintaining marketing lists for our customers, and they can
Right.
be sending out these bulk messages, so that for the restaurant industry, you can imagine, super important for them because they're constantly having menu changes or limited time offers or holiday promotionals and specials and whatever it may be. Communicating that quickly to their guests is super important. And so we do work with the restaurant in order to determine what's going to be best for them. We find that the more mid-market enterprise restaurants that we work with, they're needing to prioritize speed and throughput of these messages, because they may be sending a million messages in one day. And the messages are very timely because they're running this offer where, hey, come in for lunch today, and it's a one day only thing we're doing. If that message doesn't get to that individual in the morning, we find that there's there's a lot less likelihood that they're going to take them up on that offer later, the next day or the day after. So there is a timeliness factor. And so for us personally, we use a lot of toll-free. Toll-free works the best for our particular use case. But we do have every now and then restaurants who they're married to this particular phone number that they've had. Their customers are super familiar with it. They've got it on speed dial. In some of those cases, we'll port it over, and we'll make sure that we're doing 10 DLC on those. So it kind of depends on the restaurant, but we work with them to make sure that it's going to be the best for what their outcome is.
That's awesome. Oh,
Jinx.
wow. It's like we co-host a podcast or something, man. Come on. That really is awesome though. It's cool to hear. One, as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you guys started on one idea, but as you get closer and closer to your customer, you start with that initial problem, which is, how do I facilitate these conversations? But then you expand and you start to see, hey, they have other needs like marketing these promotions or deals in a timely fashion. And obviously your platform can facilitate that. As someone who, it seems like, well, maybe quick question before I jump into the question in my mind. Messaging is one channel that you guys use. Are there other channels that you all are using to facilitate this interaction with your customers?
It's primarily messaging. But to your point of, as an entrepreneur, you're constantly looking for problems and you're identifying new problems and you're pivoting and shifting to make sure that the problems you're solving are the most painful. We've identified additional ways, right? We're also using voice in a lot of cases where the voice landscape and the phone landscape for restaurants is actually pretty terrible. And this came to us because one of our customers who has 40 different units out in New York, their coffee shop, they did a little audit and they recognized that 1/3 of all of their stores had literally unplugged their landline because the managers were just so frustrated with needing to pick up the phone. And so,
not shocked.
yeah, right. I mean, as a consumer, I've found that where I try and call and the line is just busy or it seems disconnected or they never pick up. And so it's kind of this darned if you do, darned if you don't within the industry. If you pick up the phone, then you're potentially ignoring a guest in the store. If you don't pick up the phone, you're potentially missing out on a customer who was upset that you could win back, or a customer who wants to place an order. So we recognized that there was an opportunity for us to transition a lot of the conversations that were happening on the phone or not happening on the phone because somebody wasn't picking up to messaging. So we'll actually, be their voice provider and provide them with an IVR, a phone tree, to be able to select, hey, I want to place an order. Great. Let us send you a text message with the online ordering link. So we're actually helping them
kind of funneling everyone into the messaging flow.
Yeah, because it's just so much more convenient for the restaurant because a lot
the
of these
asynchronous nature of it. Yeah,
exactly. That's right. So that's another way that we're kind of helping, but primarily messaging. I mean, we're sending millions and millions of messages out to guests and facilitating that.
Got it. And so as a platform that, is almost entirely messaging driven, what if you could shine a spotlight on any big issue that's happening in the industry right now, or anything you're really excited about, like what would you focus on? What would you shine that spotlight on today?
I think that recently, and what's going to continue to happen, is there is more and more of a spotlight on spam and making sure that consumers are getting the messages that they want without getting the messages they don't want. And so I've seen that within the industry, among carriers, aggregators, legislators, there has been a lot going on within the last couple of years, and I foresee it continuing. That is to get to that end of making sure that consumers are getting messages that they want to. And so that's, I think, the biggest thing. Everything that's happened with the verification side of toll free to make sure that um, that you're actually providing the correct information, that you have a proper legitimate use case and reason and flow and process for being able to message these customers, and everything on the 10 DLC as far as, registering those with the campaign registry, and that there is a lot happening right now. And what I would say is that anybody who's out there who is a legitimate business, who's looking to incorporate messaging, they need to really make sure that they're educating themselves on what does that landscape look like, and making sure that there are proper use cases, because that creates a better world for all of us. None of us want to get those fake messages coming from the IRS or saying that our parcel is waiting for pickup and we know that it's not legitimate, right? That's annoying. People do not like that. And so us as businesses who are messaging millions and millions of people, we need to be sure that there's the proper opt-out, proper opt-in, the proper, we're sending at the right volumes, and everything that we're doing is above the table, and that we're doing it properly so that we can avoid that as a people. So that's what I would shine a spotlight on, is there's a lot going on right now as far as spam and making sure that it's being taken care of. And some things are for the better, some things slow down the process, but you just have to then adapt. And that's why the education piece of it is so important, that as more hoops, you could call them, are created to ensure that people who are sending are legitimate and have that proper use case, that the businesses that are needing to jump through the hoops are doing so in an automated way, and with a partner like Bandwidth who is making that super simple and super easy.
As easy and as simple as it can be. I mean,
Yeah.
well said though. I personally, that I live in the registration, verification, brief approval, what have you, whatever channel that you're in at the moment. I live in that day-to-day world, and it's sometimes hard to maintain sight of the overall objective when you get caught up in sort of the pain of my customers, and then subsequently your customers, in some cases customers, the pain of going through all of the changes at once, where we're implementing best practices for channels that are used by millions of businesses, really. So it's good to kind of come back to the why. At least it's helpful for me, and to see sort of how far we've come in a short period of time, and to understand the volume and the velocity of the change and the why behind it. And then the continuing sort of the dial effect, right? I think about it as like a radio dial, where we're constantly trying to tune right into that station. And sometimes you go a little bit past, and sometimes you need to come a little bit farther back to kind of dial right into where you need to be, as far as the restrictions that are sort of really appropriate in the industry to limit spam, but then not be such a barrier to small and medium-sized businesses, because that's ultimately not the goal, right? And that's a role that Bandwidth is playing in sort of the industry ecosystem, and continuing to advocate for our customers that utilize these channels like 10DLC and toll-free. So very well said on that account.
Yes, agree. And Derek, maybe it sounds like you mentioned education a few times. Would love to hear, how is your team educating your customers on some of these industry requirements and regulations, and when things do change, like, again, it seems like you are really close to your customer and what their pains are. Like, how are you educating, empathizing, sharing that. Because as Caitlin said, it's kind of like a domino in this industry of we're working with you, you're working with your customers. They're the end. That's where the end pain kind of lies. Like there's a chain reaction that happens. So how does that work in your mind?
Yeah, there are a couple of factors to this. I think the first thing is we need to make sure that internally we're educated, because it comes down to being able to articulate and communicate not just the what, but to your point, Caitlin, the why of why is this happening and why are we doing this, and help them to recognize that in some cases it's a requirement, right? It's a legal requirement. In other cases, it's a best practice because we're trying to create a better world of messaging where people are getting the messages that they want. And so for us, that's the first step is education. And thankfully, all of the resources that we need are being provided by Bandwidth, right? Like we're getting up-to-date notifications and emails of, hey, this is changing with plenty of notice so that we can internally prepare and make sure that our teams are educated on that. And then the second aspect is that communication to our customers, making sure that they understand the very specific what's, what is allowed, what's not allowed, what's going to be the best practice, and kind of holding their hand along the way, right? To not overcomplicate it. Because that's one thing that even for myself, as I was first getting into the world of messaging, I recognized that it can become complex very fast. You've got a lot of players in the space who are doing different things, and things are done in slightly different ways. And you can go the 10DLC and the local and toll-free route, and this is that, and it can become overwhelming. And so we try and remove as much of the complexity for our customers and clearly articulate this is what you need to do, and this is the bare minimum of what you need to do in order for it to be the best possible outcome for you. And a lot of it we take upon ourselves, right? Like as we're providing this service to our customers, we see ourselves not as a software company, but a hospitality company that happens to sell software. And so we're really thinking about how do we take care of our customers and how can we help them by making it simple and easy. So that's what we're doing. It is a radio dial that we're constantly adjusting to see where are we getting that static and then where
Yeah.
are we getting it really clear.
When you're thinking about how to continue to dial in for 2025 and how you can become the best software hospitality provider that you can be, right? What are you thinking about in 2025 that's getting you really excited? I feel like we just did our thorn. Do you ever do rose and thorn? Your rose and your thorn. We kind of just did our thorns. So what's your rose for 2025?
Well, I'm excited about a couple of things within the industry for 2025. I think that the world has been taken by storm with artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
and what's happening with generative AI is really interesting. I'm really excited to see how we can smooth out a lot of these challenges like spam, like verification and registration, making use of AI to make that process even more seamless and quicker. I envision a world where a lot of the messages that we're getting are being run through some artificial intelligence to be able to better determine whether they're spam or not. Right now we're a bit limited in what we can do, and I'm sure that the black box algorithms that exist out there are doing the absolute best that they can, but false positives and false negatives still happen, right? Sometimes things still get through. Sometimes things that should have gone through don't go through. And it's this constant cat and mouse game of trying to identify what's legitimate, what's not. I think that AI can speed that up quite significantly. And not only, in that particular realm, but everything that's going to come about because of how AI can make things quicker and faster, and we can find new creative ways of doing it that our human brains maybe just can't with our great pattern recognition understand, but a machine or something that has a bit more intelligence can. So I don't know. There are people on both camps of the AI situation, and I recognize that. But I'm one who likes to have a lot of optimism towards how this can be used for good. And so I'm hoping that we see more being done in the messaging space as it pertains to artificial intelligence.
No, I actually think that's a great call out, super insightful. And we've actually been talking a lot about it at these sort of messaging ecosystem forums that exist sort of on a global basis. It's this MEF organization where we come together, a bunch of messaging nerds, and talk about messaging and communications globally. So it's just exactly like you talked about, right? Like, how can we utilize the pretty well-developed generative models that exist, these natural language models, to actually look real time and be able to pull out harmful, spammy, phishing, hateful types of messages, the bad actors that get onto platforms and abuse the channels for others, and then eliminate some more of these like false positive flagging, where you have these words that may be taken out of context in maybe a dumb model, for example, that would or should trigger. But once you actually add the context of the language around it, you would be able to figure out, okay, well, that's not actually a harmful message. It's being used in a completely different way. And so it's something we're actually looking at in our own spam platforms. I believe actually our CEO just spoke about it on our earnings call very recently. So equally excited about the opportunities there as well.
Awesome. Love to hear that.
Love that, Derek and Caitlin. Appreciate. So, Derek, speaking of exploring, would love to maybe get a peek behind the curtain of Ovation's roadmap. Anything that you're excited the team is digging into? Any problem that you guys are solving for your restaurants, your hospitality companies that you could share with us, and maybe how messaging is a part of that?
Yeah. I think the greatest opportunity for us is kind of, going back to this conversation around AI and how can we enhance using AI and not fully replace. One of the things that we're looking at is how can we help assist a restaurant manager who may not be formally trained on how to handle customer concerns over messaging? How can we help guide them using AI to make sure that their voice is appropriate, make sure that their length is appropriate, make sure that the way that they're saying things is the right way. That's one thing that we've found is that managers at restaurants are particularly good when they're face to face with somebody, because traditionally that's how it's been. Somebody has a complaint, they go up and they talk to a manager, right? Now there's this new idea of message with a manager, and that's a little bit unique, right? You have to think about grammar, have to think about punctuation, you have to think about all these things that we maybe take for granted when you're representing your business. And you're one of 500 different restaurants in this brand, but you're ultimately representing the brand. You need to make sure that all of that is a bit more buttoned up, or it's at least understandable and articulate. And so that's where I think that we can really begin to help out. Is the other thing with restaurant managers is they're busy. They're on their feet all the time, right? And they are managing everything that's going on. And so to be able to send off sort of a shorthand message that can then be transformed a bit using AI to send to the guest is something that's really interesting for us. That and language barriers, right? Because you've got guests and you've got managers where English, even here in the US, isn't their native
Right.
language. It might be a second language for them. And so getting a little bit of assistance to be able to still provide a great guest experience, making use of technology is something I'm really excited about. So I think we're going to see here at Ovation a couple of things that'll help out with that.
Oh, that's super exciting. I can't wait to opt in and figure out what that is. I need to figure out who's one of your customers so I can get one of those text messages.
Absolutely.
Speaking of favorite text messages, so we've got to ask this to every guest, right? So Zach and I were actually chatting on this before you joined, but And it doesn't have to be a restaurant example, could be. What's your favorite text message that you've received, or just a great example of a fun one you want to highlight?
Yeah. I might break the rules here. I might give a couple,
Yeah.
but they'll be short here. So first off, uh, I've got a 7-year-old son, and we just barely got him, one of those smart watches so that he can be messaging and calling us if he's walking home from school and that sort of thing.
Kids these days, man.
It is so different. It is so different. And we're certainly not the type of parents that are going to just shove a phone in his face. We're going to wait on those things, but we figured this is locked down enough for him.
That's very fair.
Instead of a phone, it's a watch that you throw into their face.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. But the good thing is it's very much just like you can only communicate with mom and dad.
Right.
Yes.
I love the messages that he sends me because he will send me the sweetest messages saying things like, "Dad, I love you so much. I'm so glad you're my dad." And then sometimes he will send just 100 emojis, and that's all I'll get. It will be so out of context. I'll be at work and I'll just see a message with 1,000 different emojis on it pop up, and I just love that. So that's one that's just near and dear to my heart that I love, and
that's gonna be hard to top.
It is gonna be hard to top. I don't think this tops it, but what I love is this is a message that has thus far outperformed any other LTO, limited time offer, special marketing message of any of our customers. One of our customers years ago sent a message that was as short and sweet as $5 burrito today only. And that's what they sent. And it had a footer with their name and opt out, all that. But that was the body of the message, was really just $5 burrito today only. And they had lines out the door. People were going bonkers, and the redemption rate was through the roof. And so that is something I use all the time as I'm talking to our customers. And I say, just keep it simple. Simple is better. People
KISS
don't
principle.
Exactly, right? People don't want this long, flowery message with, all this. No, they just want to see what am I getting, when, and what's the deal, right?
Yep.
And that short little message, short and sweet, hasn't been beat today as far as the redemption rate. So I love that one as well for its simplicity and just how easy it is.
$5 burritos. You heard it here first. That's so good. Not a question that we ask every guest on our podcast, but do have to get this in. Derek, do you have a favorite member of your board? That would be a better way to say it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off,
favorite or maybe most famous? I don't know.
Yes, I was going to say, if any of our advisors are listening, they're all our favorites because we love them all for different reasons, and they're helpful in so many ways.
Derek, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you again for joining us today. Really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been great to talk about this. This is something I'm passionate about.
Awesome. Well, we don't want to take up too much more of your invaluable time, so we will wrap this up. But I did want to give our listeners the opportunity to connect with you, Derek, offline if possible. So maybe for everyone listening, is there a method of communication you prefer? If others have questions after the pod is over, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, I'd be happy to connect with anybody who wants to on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to find me. I'm not hard to find. Derek Morgan at Ovation. There should be only one of me out there.
Awesome.
So yeah, feel
one
free
and
to
only.
The one and only. Thank you again, Derek, for joining us today. And thanks, listeners, for tuning in. You can catch up on all of our episodes on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or you can watch this season on YouTube. And be sure to head on over to stateofmessaging.com. That is stateofmessaging.com to download your free copy of the State of Messaging 2025 report. All right, Derek, thanks again. And Caitlin, as always, thank you.
Till next time. See y'all.